While this is the Amiga Love channel, I also love classic Macintoshes too. I recently got back into that scene and was stunned to see how challenging some simple tasks like moving files from the internet over to a classic Mac is in 2020. In the Commodore 64 and Amiga world, I think a lot of us take those basic tasks for granted. So I've made this video in an attempt to try and make the process easier for others to understand and follow in the future. My setup includes the following: a 2015 Apple MacBook Pro laptop with the SD card slot, Basilisk II running on OS X Big Sur, 1991 Apple Quadra 700 desktop computer, and a Floppy Emu by Big Mess of Wires, or BMOW. First, let's briefly take a look at what Basilisk II is and why it's so cool in the first place. It's an open source 68,000 Macintosh emulator, and it has been ported to run in Unix, Mac OS X, Windows, BIOS, if you can remember BIOS, and Amiga OS 3.x. You can emulate either a Mac Classic machine, like the old black and whites running Mac OS 0 through 7.5, or a Mac 2 series machine, which runs Mac OS 7.x, 8.0, and 8.1. In my case, I decided to go the Mac 2 route with color, because it most closely matches my Quadra 700's environment. Most importantly for me, it provides a pathway for file exchange between my MacBook Pro and my old classic Quadra 700, the painfully gorgeous Jurassic Park computer.
John. I can't get Jurassic Park back online without Dennis Nedry.
But of course, you could also download software from the internet and run it right inside of Basilisk if you don't have any classic hardware anymore and you want to get your Macintosh fix. You know, like Word 5.1, Photoshop 3, or perhaps Infocom's Mac exclusive, the role-playing game Quarterstaff. To install Basilisk, you need to follow some very specific steps, and I highly recommend Emaculation.com's excellent guide. I'll leave a link below in the description for you guys to find all of the things I'm about to talk about. Next, let's take a look at some of the hardware that you're going to want to use in addition to your modern computer. Steve Chamberlain, a computer engineer and software developer who goes by the moniker BMOW, or Big Meso Wires, is an expert in the Apple II and Macintosh. 4 years ago, he produced and now sells what he calls the Floppy Emu. Floppy Emu is perfect for booting your favorite games, transferring files from vintage to modern machines, and troubleshooting a computer without a working operating system. You just plug in the Emu board and you'll be up and running in seconds. This fantastic plug-and-play hardware device emulates a floppy disk with built-in compatibility with all classic Apple II, Macintosh, and even Lisa computers. It uses a removable SD memory card for storing various disk images and mimics an Apple floppy disk and drive, or even an Apple hard drive. I got the BMOW, or BMOW, Floppy Emu Deluxe Bundle, which comes with an assembled Floppy Emu Model C device, a frosted acrylic case which I needed to assemble, and that was kind of fun, an SD card with pre-installed very handy vintage Apple and Mac software, and a DB19 disk extension cable. Now, if you have an all-in-one classic Mac, like the old school all-in-one black and whites, you can simply plug it into the back of one of their external floppy drive ports and you're good to go. For the Lisa or Macintoshes like my Quadra 700, which have only one internal port on the motherboard for the original internal floppy drive, Steve created an additional little doodad that lets you use both the Floppy Emu and the internal drive. And you can switch between the two, you just can't use both simultaneously. So I got that little extra piece as well. and now can have everything sit outside the Q700's case and flip between the original SuperDrive or the Floppy Emu depending on my needs, because my internal drive works beautifully. Once you have the Floppy Emu all set up and ready to go, you can now load disk images onto your classic Mac that you downloaded online, and from that standpoint, the software options are vast. Oftentimes, however, you can't just drag any file you find online and stick it on the SD card. But for just moving files and disks over, you need to create or use floppy disk images. And this is where Basilisk II is sometimes extremely helpful. Okay guys, it is demo time. Let's take a run through on Basilisk II and see how we might pull files from the internet into emulation, and how we can also take those same files and move them to our classic Macintoshes using Basilisk II and a Floppy Emu, right? So let's fire up what I have here is the Basilisk II GUI. And you'll notice when I first launch it, it's got a hard disk image in the volumes area of macOS 7.5.3, because that is exactly what my Quadra 700 is running right now. It also shows that I'm linking to a Unix root of a shared folder on my desktop. That's this folder right here, okay? And we're going to come back to that in just a second. But let's just launch Basilisk II by default, the way it comes right out of the box. And in less than a second, or maybe 1.5 seconds, we've just launched this amazing Basilisk II Mac emulation software. Now, you'll notice this screen is fairly high res. For the times, this would have been a really monster Mac. Okay, and you'll also notice, here's my hard drive, macOS 7.5.3, that's the name of the hard drive. Here's the Unix folder, right? That's what we were just looking at a second ago in that preference pane. Here's shared. If I were to just take, say, I don't know, this PDF file, which I'm not going to actually open on the Mac, but let me just drop it in that shared folder and then open up the Unix folder. There it is. That's the same file. This is the conduit, right? This is the conduit between the modern and the emulation / old Mac that we're going to use. Let's say we're looking for some software. And one of the places I would highly recommend, if you've never been there before, is Macintosh Garden, okay? It is a phenomenal repository that is utterly vast of software for the Mac that ranges from the really, really ancient black and white days to the 7.5 days, like I'm about to do on the Quadra 700, and even the PowerPC stuff that came in the late 90s. It has a huge wide range to choose from, and pretty much anything you can think of, you're going to find it. So for example, what if we were to get the classic Oregon Trail, right? Doesn't everybody like Oregon Trail? Dying of dysentery, right? I know I do. And then when you get to a page like this, it kind of looks like an article the way that they've designed it, but you get a little bit of information on who made it and when it was made. Here are the download links over here. You might get some screenshots, and then you're going to get some stuff. And down at the very bottom is the most important part, really. It's going to tell you which machines this is compatible for. And then over here, you go to the links. Now, you'll see here it's oregontrail.image.sit, and here's a meg. And then here's oregontrail1_2.zip. Well, this sounds more recent and more new, so I'm going to go for that. Just click the www. It's going to work. Go ahead and save it locally. And boom. The next thing I want to grab is Microsoft Word 5.1, what some people consider, even to this day, as the best version ever made, because why was it so good? Well, because it was so simple. It wasn't just a bunch of bloatware. It was really easy to just sit down, write that book you've always wanted to write, nice clean interface, and not a lot of bloat. Okay? So you come down here and you're going to see the different variations of the downloads that we have up above. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here they have a nice description, 1, 2, 3, 4. The one I'm going to go for is this writable install disk that allows me to personalize it. So I'll go ahead and grab that. Save that. I mean, guys, there's like Photoshop on here. Anything you can imagine, it's in here. The next thing I wanted to grab, since we're here, is an incredible game by Infocom that was only made on the Mac. You could only play it on a Mac or another machine that was emulating a Mac. It's called Quarterstaff by Infocom, and it is an incredible role-playing game it actually has graphics, and if you had a color Macintosh, it kind of bridged this weird world of black and white and color graphics in a text adventure environment that is just super cool. So we'll go ahead and grab that too, and I think that's going to pretty much run the gamut of all the different options that we might run into. And some of you might remember this SIT stuff. It's not asking you to sit down. This is actually a stuff it file. Okay, I'm going to unzip this. I'm going to decompress that. And now see, that's cool. That folder actually has a graphic on it. That's super nice. That's kind of Amiga-esque if you ask me. Okay, so now here are the 3 different things that we want to play with in this demo. So I'm going to grab those 3 things and I'm going to throw them into the shared folder on my desktop. Why? So that I can access them from within Basilisk. Let's open that up again. And I'm not going to change anything here yet. I'm just going to look. All right, so here we are in Basilisk one more time, and I'm going to double click on Unix, and there are my 3 files. Now, you might be thinking, what are these things? Can I just play with them now? Can I just use them right here? Maybe. Depends. This right here, this IMG, that is a type of disk image. So you need to think of that as sort of like, if you're an Amiga person, you need to think of that sort of like an ADF file. And you can't just double click on an ADF file inside the Unix folder, right? And think that it's going to work. It's going to do something like this. It's going to say, well, that's not going to work. These DSK files, those look a lot like the hard disk image that we saw at the very beginning, right? Same idea, but you can't double click on these and use those either. And then there's Quarterstaff. Now these are the actual files. These are not some sort of disk image. These are the actual files, and they are usable. And you can actually just click on this. If you wanted to just play it right within emulation, you can click on this and drag straight to your hard drive if you wanted to. And there they are, right there. I can double click on this. And if this is as far as you want to go and you just want to get your Mac fix right now and play some badass games for the Macintosh, you can do it just like that. Just move them on over if they're like that. But if they're a disk image, sorry guys, you have to go a little bit of a further step. And that's what I want to show you. And I want to show you how to get Quarterstaff over to your Mac too, if you'd rather play it, not just here, but on your classic hardware, the way that I like to play it. So what you have to do is, you don't actually go find those files in the shared folder. What you want to do is you actually want to click on this Add button. And it's subtle, but there it is. Click on Add. And I'm actually looking at my shared folder right now on my desktop, okay? And I'm going to start with Oregon Trail, why not? And I'm going to go ahead and add that disk 1. And for fun, I'll go ahead and add disk 2, just in case it needs to reference it as well. It might. And I'll go ahead and hit Start. So what I'm saying is, start Basilisk 2 with my hard drive image, and disk 1 and disk 2. So it's kind of a fancy Mac. It has 2 disk drives going at the same time. Boom, it's done. Here's disk 1 and here's disk 2. So if I look in disk 1, here's the installer for Oregon Trail. Now if I wanted, I could just drag all this stuff right onto the hard drive, okay, like in my games folder. And look, I already did this earlier. But I can just drag these files over and use the installer, or I can even just use the installer from the disk image, which is the way it was originally intended. Okay, here's MECC. What was it? Minnesota Education, blah, 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 blah. I forget what that stands for, but in any case, it says, do you want to install this color version? Heck yes, I do. Because this is a Mac OS 753. It thinks it's a Mac 2, basically. And I'll say install that. And it says it was done because it's that freaking fast, which is awesome. And an error occurred because whatever, it's crapware. But what I can do now is go over to this Oregon Trail folder. It just installed itself on top of itself again. Double click on Oregon Trail, and it remembers me from the last time I installed this. And I can start to play this right now in color. Good old Jim Bob wants to go across half the country. And here I get to start with 1,600 bucks. I get to go buy my stuff. I'm gonna start with about 7 or 8 oxen. Here's a pro tip. You wanna actually buy quite a lot of this stuff, but you wanna save about 400 bucks and then you'll be fine. Ooh, don't tell your kids that. It'll ruin it. It's a total spoiler. All right, so let's launch Basilisk II again, and I'm gonna remove the disk images from before, and I'm gonna add, this time, go to shared. This is the Word, Microsoft Word. Why are you still there? Get out of here. Here we go. Double click on that. There we go. There is my Microsoft Word disk image. And again, I can install this locally here to my emulation if I want to, if this is as far as I want to go, and get into all this business. Hey. Okay. Yes. Continue. Sure. Boom. Why not? Select a folder for installation. Ooh, I want to go up. Right here. This is fine. And install. And it wants another. So this actually has, if I remember correctly, 7 total disks. I'm going to stop that right now because I only download the 1 installer, because ultimately what I'm trying to do is show how to take these IMG and DSK images and move them over in a way that's safe for you to be able to use them on the Floppy Emu that we took a look at earlier. Once you have them on the Floppy Emu, then you can create these, you can turn these disk images on classic hardware and either do what I'm doing here, which is installing them straight from the disk, or moving them over somewhere else. Now, how would I do it? How would I get it onto the Floppy Emu? You can't just, then this is where I had to kind of wrap my head around this a little bit. Took me a little bit to understand this process. So if I were to go in here and I were to say, take this IMG file, you cannot just take this IMG file and move it over to the Floppy Emu and expect it to work every time. You cannot take these DSK files necessarily and move them over to the Floppy Emu every time you find one. A lot of times what happens is you need to actually launch them here in emulation and then drag their contents to a blank floppy. It's not always the case, but a lot of times it is the case. Otherwise, when you move these .img files over to the Floppy Emu, it will literally say install w.img. It won't actually just say install w, the way you, or whatever you name the floppy disk. So let me show you what I'm talking about. On my desktop, okay, I actually have a couple of floppy disk blank images, okay, and they are here, so you can see. So this, and I'll just delete this one because that's from yesteryear. So this says floppy disk images, copy me first. I put that on my desktop, and back in the day, the earliest Macs, right, they were 800K floppy images, or 800K floppy disks, and then later on, they were able to go up to 1.4 megabyte. My Quadra 700 has something inside it called the Super Drive, which allows it to use either disk image, which is really kick-ass. So I keep a copy of both of these, and let me show you where I found them. You can go to here in Macintosh Garden. Another great one is Macintosh Repository, okay? That's also a .org. It's this really kind of funny, old school looking site. And look for, let's see, blank, floppy disk. Blank floppy disk images right here. You're going to want to download this locally somewhere on your Mac or your PC or whatever it is that you're using, your Amiga. And you're going to need these blank floppy disks. So I'm going to just duplicate this and I'm going to use the copies. Okay. And I'm only going to use the 1.4 meg. Even though I know what I'm about to copy are 800Ks, I'm going to use this one. And I'm going to just drag that into my shared folder for now. It doesn't have to be there. It can actually be anywhere you want it. Truth is. can be anywhere you want it. So I'm going to launch this again, and I'm going to add my floppy image, and I'm going to add this Word install disk. Okay, and I'll start. So here's my blank disk, this 1.4, right? And here's my Word disk. So let's open up the blank. Let's open up Word. See how it's only called install here on my desktop? If you just dragged the w_install.img onto your Floppy Emu, it would still say w_floppy emu or w_install.img. You want to just grab all this stuff, move it onto your blank floppy. Okay, there it all is. And now it's instantly saved. The moment I moved it over, it's done. Now the 1.4 megabyte floppy, that file in my shared folder, which is where I put it, this file has now been altered. Desktop, shared, 1.4. Now look, see here, modified today, 7:25. Well, and that was a minute ago. So that just changed. This is the image you can move over to your Floppy Emu, and it will be the Word install disk #1. And it'll just work. It'll just work. And you can then, if you wanted, drag that onto, what I did was, because I was missing disk 1 and I had 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, I moved all of this over onto my hard drive and then moved it onto an actual physical floppy disk so I would have a complete set. And then I installed it. And I had Word 5.1 on my Quadra 700, and it is so sweet, you guys. I did the same thing for Oregon Trail, and with Quarterstaff, this is actually a 3-disc game originally. And what I needed to do, because I didn't have the 3 discs at the time, I actually needed to move, and I just kind of did a little math in my head, and I would just pick like, oh, okay, I'm going to move this amount, and then I'm going to move, I didn't need this because this was created by whoever made the dupes. And I put this on a disk, and I put these 2 on a disk, and I moved those over image by image. And you can do all 3 right now, and then load all 3 later using the Floppy Emu right into your classic Mac, and just drag all of the contents into a temp folder, rename it if you want to Quarterstaff, install it, boom, you're done. Quarterstaff is right there on your classic Mac. And that's how you do it. You got to use blank floppy disk images and copy your stuff over in emulation and drag it on over with the Floppy Emu, a godsend to the classic Mac scene. In the Amiga and Commodore worlds, we have it so easy. I feel like we're completely spoiled, to be honest. We have brand new motherboards, brand new accelerators, brand new keyboards, brand new cases. I mean, it goes on and on and on. We can pretty much build brand new, you don't even have to build brand new, you can just use a Mister, I suppose, if you really felt like it, but I digress. In the classic Mac world, finding brand new innovative hardware products is extremely limited. But I do feel like it is starting to change. All of the stuff I've just shown you, except for Basilisk, which is ancient, it's 20 years old, but from a hardware perspective, the stuff that Steve Chamberlain is doing is only within the last 4 years. Who knows? Maybe someone out there will start creating USB cards for new bus ports. Wouldn't that be something? We can only wish. We can always wish and dream. Never hurts. So guys, I hope this has inspired some of you who have an old Mac in your closet or in your basement to pull that sucker out and try and use it again and play some of the old software and games that you grew up with that is so worth using even to this day. I hope this has at least made it a little bit easier and a little less intimidating for some of you out there who haven't done this yet to give it a try. If I can do it, I guarantee you can too. And remember guys, keep that Amiga love flowing and the retro world too. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Amiga love.